Welcome to Talking with Tech. I'm your host, Rachel Madel, joined as always by Chris Bouguet. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Rachel. All right, I got something fun for you today. You ready for this? Okay, so I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to invite you to listen to some audio that you haven't heard before, and we'll just listen to it, and then I'd be really interested to hear your reaction to it, okay? So let me share my screen, and we'll put the audio in. I'm sure Michaela and Luke will put it in so that everyone can listen to it together right here in the episode. Okay, so share my screen. All right.
So you're ready to dive deep into augmentative and alternative communication.
AAC?
Yeah, AAC.
That's a great choice.
You chose Talking with Tech to guide you.
I was going to say that's a really good pick.
Right. So this is a podcast run by two speech-language pathologists, Rachel Madel and Chris Bouguet.
You'll be hearing that term, speech-language pathologist, SLP, a lot in this field.
A lot.
They are the experts who help people with communication challenges find their voice, literally.
Literally, yeah.
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 So, yeah, and what I think is so interesting about Rachel and Chris is that they don't just talk about the technical side of it.
Yeah.
They bring in real stories.
Yeah.
Like there's this one episode where they talk about a young man named Leo who had been non-speaking for years.
Wow.
And with the right AAC system and of course
the support
of his SLP, Leo was able to share his thoughts and feelings for the first time.
Wow.
He even ended up writing a poem about his experience that brought everyone to tears.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
See, that's what I love about this field, like those stories.
Yeah.
They're so powerful.
Yeah.
They really show what AAC can do, like how it transforms lives.
It does.
Okay, so let's get into what people are saying about Talking with Tech, because we've listened to it.
Yeah.
We like it.
Let's talk about it.
But like, what are other people saying?
Yes, definitely.
It's so cool how Talking with Tech is really connecting with listeners.
Yeah.
There was this one review I saw.
Okay.
It said, "This podcast made me feel seen and understood as a parent of a child with communication needs."
Wow.
And I thought,
yeah,
so many people probably.
That's so true because feeling alone in this journey is a common experience both for individuals with communication differences and their families.
Right.
So when something like Talking with Tech comes along and gives that sense of community and validation, it can be so empowering.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, they offer practical advice, too.
They do.
Which is so important.
Yes, very.
They have this framework called the 10 Cardinal Rules to AAC implementation.
Right.
And it seems like it's been a game changer.
Yeah, I bet.
For a lot of their listeners.
For sure.
So I'm really curious about these cardinal rules.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about what makes AAC implementation successful?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's not as easy as here's a device, go talk, right?
Right.
Right.
There are so many factors.
There's so many factors.
And one of the cardinal rules that I find really interesting is the importance of presuming competence.
Okay, what does that mean?
So that means always assuming that an individual has something to say, even if they haven't had a reliable way to communicate it before.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
It is.
It's so easy to underestimate what someone's capable of if they're struggling to communicate,
Absolutely. And when you presume competence, it changes how you approach AAC.
Right.
It means giving lots of opportunities for communication, offering choices, and really listening to what the person is trying to say, even if it's not super clear at first. Right.
Wow. Okay, so we've seen how Talking with Tech uses real stories, like Leo's, to show how powerful AAC can be.
Yeah.
And then we've also touched on the more practical side with these 10 cardinal rules, and specifically presuming competence.
Yeah, and it's that combination of inspiration and practical advice that makes this podcast
so good.
Such a great resource for anyone who wants to support people with communication needs.
Absolutely. And on that note, I want to say thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of AAC and Talking with Tech.
It's been great.
As you continue to learn about AAC, I want you to think about people in your life who could benefit from this. How can you advocate for accessible communication and help others find their voice?
And remember, communication is a basic human right.
Yes.
Everyone deserves to be heard.
Okay, so that was the audio clip that I invited you to listen to. What were your thoughts while listening to it?
My thoughts were, who are these people at first?
Yeah, they sound pretty good, right?
They sound pretty good. And then my next thought, because I know you, Chris, I'm like, what kind of AI tool has he discovered that has basically emulated a podcast?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So those two people are not people. They don't exist. That was created by AI. And get this, it took me less than 2 minutes to do. And all I did is, do you remember about 6 years ago, you and I authored a blog post for somebody, on five signs that your child might need AAC, right? I found that old blog post. You and I had worked on it on a Google Doc, and that's all it was. I literally opened that document into this AI tool, and then it created that 5 or 6 minute podcast discussion between two make-believe podcast hosts discussing our podcast and the content that we generated from that Google Doc, which it wasn't hours of work to give them that information. I didn't have to upload 9 different documents or whatever. It wasn't a 184-page PDF of my book or something like that, right? It wasn't scrub all of Instagram to find Rachel Madel's reels. You know what I mean? It was just one blog post that we wrote together ages ago that it was trained on. So pretty amazing stuff, right?
I was noticing the kind of overlap in the conversation, I feel like made it seem more natural, but also it happened to the point where I was like, it's happening a lot in ways that I'm like, like that's what like tipped me off a little to the AI. I was like, and also the redundancy. They were like, oh, they like kind of circled back to the same concepts, but super cool.
I had that same thought when I, first listened to it. It was like, this probably could be half the time, right? Like they're repeating themselves, and but still, like, just it's crazy what it can do. And then I've been thinking about since I've been exploring it, the educational impact on this. Like if you could take some sort of, PDF or Google Doc or something on some sort of content and you load it up into this AI tool, and then it produces this sort of podcast and you could provide it to students as an option to listen to. Now you're multiplying the modalities that you could invite kids or people to learn from, right? So it's not just you have to use your reading abilities and your reading comprehension abilities to read this text, and you don't have to go find some sort of complementary material that is a podcast or an audio version of this text or something. And you could now have the option of having two make-believe people discussing the content, and could that help people remember it better? Like, oh yeah, I remember when that person was talking about, that fake person was talking about it, and the way they put it and the way they described it and the way they summarized it, and the other person sort of agreed with it. Like when you and I are at a conference or anyone's at a conference, one of the ways we learn from a conference is those shoulder conversations we have outside of a session, right? Because you, me, and Sarah Gregory are all talking, afterwards about the session we were in, and we're all brainstorming like, well, what did you think? What did you think? So, same sort of idea is that there's these two entities discussing it, and you could potentially, remember the content better.
The other capacity that I feel like is huge is similar to your point. I feel like we learn through kind of those thoughtful discussions and conversations. We also learn through storytelling. And so how cool is it to take kind of dry or boring content and then help create some type of story around it? I think that helps people stay engaged with information. I think it helps people remember information. And so I bet you there's like some really cool ways to incorporate storytelling. And that those things matter. Like we always talk about it when we're talking about presenting too. It's not just the information that you are presenting. It's how you present the information. It's the way that you present it. And if it's engaging and has people's attention, that's a huge piece of a good presentation, and definitely a principle of adult learning. And I think there's so many possibilities with this tool.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting that you mentioned the storytelling, because, of course, one of the other things I did with the podcast, or this tool, and creating a podcast, a segment of audio of two people sort of doing a podcast, is, I play Dungeons and Dragons once a week with my friends, right? And what we do is we keep like a little notes of what's happening in each part of the story of that session that we did, right? So I took the notes from our last play session, copied it out of Google Sites, put it into a Google Doc. Again, 1.5 pages of what we are just our random notes on what happened in the story. Loaded it into this, and again, it was a podcast of two people talking about the story and our characters that we generated. It was mostly right. There was some little details wrong, but in the same way that if you've been interviewed for some sort of article and then you go back and you read what they wrote, it's like, well, it's mostly right. That's not exactly what I said. Like, anytime you see some sort of news article, you kind of get the feeling like that's probably 95% accurate, but there's a little bit of twist or something they got wrong. Same thing here with the story element. Was like, my character isn't that, but it's this, but it's close enough. And I shared it with my my longtime friends, and we were talking about it. They were all amazed and stunned by it. And my one friend said he goes, I had this really this emotional reaction to it, Chris. He's like, I remember ages ago sitting down with my mom and showing her Google Maps for the first time and zooming in on our house that we grew up in, and that was, we've lived in for ages. And she started crying when she saw it on Google Maps, like, wow, like this is profound. Like, how is someone else who's not us taking a picture of something from the sky, and I can zoom around and see the neighbors, and it just was, and it's all connected. The whole world is connected via this one tool, this map, and I can zoom out and in, and it just was blowing her mind how technology was personally affecting her. And he said, I had a very similar reaction when I was listening to these two, again, I'll put it in quotes, people or entities discussing the story that only 8 people on the planet know, and doing it in a way that we couldn't have done, like because we're so close to it. So he was like, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, there's so many possibilities here. For storytelling, and for recapping storytelling, and for understanding the story in a different fashion, or learning stuff about a character that you otherwise maybe haven't analyzed, and the list goes on. So yeah, it's so fascinating that you brought up the storytelling element.
What is this tool called?
Okay, well, let's do a little walkthrough of it. So if people because they're probably like, yeah, just like you, like, okay, so what is this, Chris? Yeah, how much does it cost? How do I get in? Well, of course, it's free. We rarely talk about paid stuff here. And so how about we do the thing where you share your screen, and we'll have you create one here live with us, so that if people are listening to the podcast, they could also sort of follow along with the instructions. How does that sound?
Sounds great. Okay.
The only thing you really need with beforehand is a Google account, which I know you have, and then be thinking about what is some sort of Google Doc you could use to link this to. It doesn't have to be. There's other things you can load up to it, or you could use YouTube videos that you can link it to. But in this case, just to sort of replicate what I did with the Google Doc, can you think of some Google Doc that you've been working on recently, maybe for AAC Ally, putting things together, or some other blog post that you have? Do you have something like that?
I do. I mean, I could, yes. AAC Ally, we have our landing page, like the sales page that we worked on before we launched the course.
Okay, perfect. All right. So if you'll share your screen, I'll walk you through it. Okay. So the website is notebooklm, the letters lm.google.com. And when you first get there, it gives you a little welcome screen. Hey, welcome to Notebook LM. And so there's what we're looking at here is a screen that just has a big create button in the middle of it, and you can just get started without even kind of reading any of the other content. Notice in your case here, you were already signed into Google Chrome. It sort of linked you all together. There might be a phase with people listening like, well, I have to input my Google information, right? My Google, my Gmail, and my Google account information. But you're already logged in here. And then below this create button, there's some 4 gray boxes resources that are sort of samples that you could like, oh, okay, I'm just exploring this. What does it do? You could look at some samples that are already created. But in this case, you already heard a sample that I just shared with you. So I'm going to invite you to hit that create button in the middle of the screen. Okay, and now it enters an interface that you're probably familiar with, where there's this sort of big rectangle that says upload resources or drag and drop. Like you can drag and drop something into this area, or you can choose a file that you upload, or down below it says Google Drive, and you can link Google Docs, Google Slides.
Hey, Google Slides, Chris? I feel like we could condense like one of our courses into like a podcast clip.
Wouldn't that be awesome? Well, we could try it. We could totally try it.
I know.
So whatever you want to do, Google Docs, Google Slides, a website, YouTube, copied text are all options, let alone things you can upload. What do you think? What's grabbing you today?
I kind of want to do like our coaching course slides.
Okay, great.
Have you tried the slides yet?
I haven't. Let's do it. Let's do it. All right. So Rachel has clicked on the Google Slides link, and it brings you to, again, what might be a familiar interface where it's just a page of all these different Google Slides that you have worked on or folders that have Google Slides in them. Rachel found our talk on coaching and is loading it up. And so it's doing the thing where it's sort of spinning and analyzing. And again, I think your mileage might vary here depending on how much stuff you're loading into it, right? Like a simple one-page Google Doc might be faster than a thing that has lots of pages. But here, in that short time, it loaded, right?
Wow, it has a summary that's so spot on.
Yeah, so this tool, this Notebook LM, one portion of it is to create an audio file, but really what it is sort of a mini version of an AI bot where you can interface by asking questions or summarizing or creating a table of contents or creating a study guide. You can essentially ask questions to the content that you've uploaded to this to Notebook LM. And then the other option is to create an audio file. So over there on the right, it says audio overview, deep dive conversation, 2 hosts. And at this point in time, when we're recording this, it's English only, and it's going to be those 2 same hosts, right? You're going to hear those 2 same voices. You click the generate button. And again, your mileage might vary here, how long it takes for it to do, and to do this conversion. But really, I think you're going to find it's like 2 or 3 minutes, for the things that we're, that I'm inviting you to upload into here, or link in here.
Look at all these other options, Chris. Study guide, FAQ, timeline, table, it's so cool.
Yeah, and down below it says start typing, and this is where, in like other generative AI tools, you might put some sort of prompt. Same idea here is you might ask it a question like, I don't know, put whatever you think in there about our coaching talk.
A question about the content?
Yeah, maybe.
What are the benefits of coaching for AAC? That's
awesome.
Oh, wait, did I mess up our generate audio?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It just shrinks to give you a larger screen, but I think that's still working in the background. All right. What we see is that, this sort of familiar chat, it looks a lot like text messaging, where your question became one of the in the message bubbles. And then below, what do we see?
So we see some bulleted points. Coaching can help communication partners better support individuals who use AAC. Training alone has not been shown to be very effective at changing people's behavior. That sounds familiar. Oh, coaching can bridge the gap between theory and practice by providing guided practice and reflective questions to help people implement new strategies. Yes, that's directly from this course of ours, Chris.
Yeah. Now, something also interwoven in there are these little numbers in gray circles. So let's see what those are. Like, so next to a sentence, there's a number 1. Next to another sentence, there's a number 2 and 3. What happens when you click on those numbers?
Wow. So when we click on the numbers, it kind of cites the slide that it used. This is amazing. Let's try number 2. Wait, hold on. Wow. This is cool, Chris. I love it.
Yeah, you click on that number, and sort of on a pane on the left-hand side of the screen is a version of the slide deck, and takes you right to the slide. So I don't know, I think it's so cool, right?
I love this. I'm like, already my little wheels are spinning. Like, how could I use this in my business, in my clinical work? Like, I'm pumped.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a copy button, so you can copy that text and paste it over to every place. I think a lot of people don't know about that, too. I think a lot of people are still like clicking at the top of text, holding it down and selecting. Yes, but there is a copy button, so it's a one-click sort of thing. It'll copy the whole thing, and you can paste it somewhere else. But there's also a Save to Note button at the bottom of the text. What does that do?
Oh, I created a note.
Yeah, so if you're familiar with Google Keep, it's sort of similar to that. Is that it shrinks things to like a sticky note size note, and it sort of pins it to this board. In the idea that this thing is called Notebook LM, it's like keeping notes in a notebook. And so now you've created a note around this particular thing. And then, of course, you could link new things and upload other things and have multiple notes, right?
Okay. So how do I go back to the audio?
All right, so down in the bottom right, there's a little asterisk and it says Notebook Guide. And when you click on that, it takes you back to that screen that that had the Help Me Create and a little summary and some suggested questions, and gave you some things like you could create an FAQ. When you're playing with a tool like this and you don't even know where to start or what to do, this tool itself gives you some suggestions of how you can interact with it and what it can do. So yeah, it's still generating the conversation. And again, I don't know, like maybe when you did start the typing and you asked it that question, maybe it paused that conversion. But it literally says, this may take a few minutes, no need to stick around. Like we can go someplace else and come back to it. So it makes me think that it's working in the background.
In the background, yeah.
But here's a question. Do you know, if you pull up the Google Slides, how many slides are in our slide deck for coaching? How about we ask the AI? How many slides are in this slide deck?
Why would we go searching for information when we can simply ask a question? Wow, 87 slides.
Yeah. So I could sort of see why it might take a little while for it to parse through the content, generate the audio of people talking about it. And you know how we do our slides, Rachel. It's not blocks of text, it's a lot of images, and then we're talking about those, and then we do a lot of interaction. You know what I mean? Like, I'll be really curious. You know that we have one slide in there that's like, we need a volunteer, and it's just Katniss Everdeen volunteering for the Hunger Games, right? Like that meme. So what's it going to do when it gets to those sorts of slides that aren't really relevant to the content itself for trying to make this podcast that it's trying to do, right? I'll be curious how it wrestles with it. But that's probably why it's taking so long, is that we've got 87 slides with many of those slides not having content that's going to help it create something relevant. While it's spinning here and working, what other uses could you see for this?
Well, so we're using a lot of AI in my online business for creating emails, and just like kind of, instead of having a blank piece of paper, we're using all types of content that we already have, or simply just a video of me either answering a question in someone's email, and then we're pulling the transcript, and then we're using that to make an email, and then my team's sending it to me. And, then I can go in and kind of make it my own and create my own voice out of it. But we've definitely been using it for that. And I'm like, how cool would it be to just like synthesize one of my like courses or one of my slide decks, or even when I'm like sending proposals, because Chris, proposal life, like we get asked to speak at a conference or some type of event, and then of course the next question is like, can you send us a proposal detailing what is this course, what's it all about, what are the learning objectives? I feel like it would be so easy to just be like, well, here's the course. I mean, oftentimes we already have some of these things, but if you're generating a new course, like AAC Ally, my new treatment course, that's a new course. So I was like, okay, like I need to write a proposal for school districts who want to sign up their whole team. And I feel like I could have simply just input in here or imported it into here and at least had some type of outline that I could use as a launching off point so that I don't have to kind of start from scratch.
Yeah, Right. If it gets you 80% of the way there and you have to take it the last 20%, you still saved 80% of your time, right? And that just buys you more time to enjoy things in life, right? Or, in our case, do more work.
In our case, just keep doing more work and add more to our to-do list.
I'll tell you another use case that I experimented with is our school district and the team that I work with has generated 4 PDFs or Google Docs that is our resource consideration guide. So these are guidance documents that our facilitators use to talk about, like, okay, what do you think we need to do here? What do we think is going to be least restrictive? This is built off of the work of the Wisconsin Assistive Technology Initiative and Joyce Abala's SET framework, right? We took those things, synthesized them, made them our own, right? Said, how do we make this work for us, right? Anyway, so we have these four documents that we use as guidance documents, and they're not very descriptive because we know what we're doing with these documents, right? They're not really meant to teach other people. They're meant to, on their own, I should say. They're meant to help us facilitate conversations. And, there's a set framework table there, right? Or the feature matching tables that people have heard us talk about on this podcast, where it's like, a blank table and then our facilitator helps fill out that first column and helps people consider the options that would go in the next column. Anyway, it's sort of a blank template, though, is what I uploaded to it. Those 4 documents uploaded to this tool, and then click that audio button, and sure enough, it generated a 6-minute or less audio clip of 2 people talking about our consideration guide process. And I was like blown away because that audio was literally a way we could send to people to describe what our process is. When someone reaches out to us and goes, hey, I need help with a thing, we often have to write back and say, well, okay, let's meet and let's talk. And then we bring up these guides and walk them through it. So this could be a thing that we send out and be like, well, here's how we're going to help. This is a little training that we do on whatever, Imagine that loading up something on just specifically, like here, we're working on coaching. What if it was motor planning? What if it was descriptive teaching? Or what if it was aided language stimulation or, aided language input, whatever term you want to use. Whatever thing you're trying to teach, you could send this out as like the pre-work, right? Like, here's, listen to this before you come to this session. It's a 6-minute thing that you can listen to while you're washing dishes, right? But that's the primer for what we're going to be experiencing when you come to this event, right? I think that could be a great way to do it. And then on the back end, same thing, like, hey, thanks for coming to this event. Just here's a quick summary of what we discussed, of these 2 people. Again, people I'll put in quotes, discussing the same content. I think that's another way you could use this. All right, the audio is done. I could see why it took so long. Rachel, do you see why it took so long?
Yeah, it's 29 minutes.
Yeah, that's the longest one I've seen so far. But a 29-minute podcast about coaching based on our 87 slides, I'll be very curious what this sounds like. You want to have a listen to the first few minutes of it?
Let's do it.
Okay, so
get ready to dive into the world of coaching for AAC.
And we're talking specifically about coaching those incredible people who support kids who use AAC.
We've got a treasure trove of slides here from a training presentation.
Okay.
It's going to be good.
Let's unlock those golden nuggets of wisdom together, shall we?
Sounds like a plan. I'm ready when you are.
One of the first things that jumps out from these slides
is this idea that just handing someone an AAC device and saying, go to town isn't really enough, is it?
Right. It's like handing someone a paintbrush and expecting them to be the next Picasso.
Exactly. And there's this hilarious slide.
With an otter, right.
Yeah.
Clearly over the moon about their 1-hour AAC training.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. It's a classic case of attended the training, check the box, ready to roll. But as we all know, it takes a bit more than that to truly master the art of AAC.
Right. Absolutely. It's not a one and done kind of deal.
These slides actually compare those kind of scattered training efforts
to a Jackson Pollock painting, full of energy.
Maybe even a little chaotic.
But not exactly a model of focused instruction.
But the perfect analogy. You might end up with something interesting, but it's not necessarily going to be effective communication, is it?
Not quite the masterpiece we were hoping for.
So this is where coaching comes in, right? Instead of just delivering information,
Coaching is about empowering those communication partners to find their own strategies, their own aha moments.
It's about guiding them to uncover those hidden talents and become those communication champions we know they can be.
I love that, communication champions. That's what it's all about.
And there's this
Unreal.
I mean, it doesn't sound like us, Chris, but it does sound like us.
Right? Because that's exactly the otter slide is that. It's a meme with an otter saying, hey, you get an hour of training and good luck with these AAC devices. And they literally understood, this AI understood that that's why how we were using that, not to promote that that's how it should work, but that that's a problem and that this coaching is a way to address it. What do you think about, as you're listening to it, the pauses and the way they sort of change their voice, like the one voice added some emphasis, right? Like, and it added like a little jokey tone to it. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the thing that resonates with me the most here is that you can hear the energy in their voice, the emotion in their tone, and like, I'm bought in. I'm like, yes, I believe it. Like I feel like there's like this energy and emotion behind it that makes me believe what they're saying. And I mean, I happen to believe it because we created that course and I believe what we created. However, like oftentimes we're presenting that course to people who maybe haven't thought about coaching, maybe don't know much about it. And I feel like the energy and emotion behind it, the passion behind the words and the information is what really resonates. And I feel like this does a beautiful job of exuding emotion.
Agreed. Like that was something kind of so those of you that are only listening to this and not seeing the video, our faces, Rachel and I are making faces as we're hearing this, these excited, like, can you believe what that sounds like? And if you've seen us present, we present, I think, with a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm and, this fun element to it. I'd be really curious if you were to take a boring slide deck that has, 5 or 6 bullet points per slide and there's no images and it's just, the dry, mundane content, and you loaded that up here to Notebook LM, would it have the same energy? Would it provide that same enthusiasm?
Chris, I just had an idea. What if we imported research? Like a research study into this. Like, I feel like there's nothing more like dry and boring than reading research. Like, how cool would it be to like listen to two people talking back and forth about a research study? I feel like that would be so great.
Totally. It would not feel like taking your medicine. It wouldn't feel like struggling through the words and what do they mean by that, right? Like it would just be a more pleasant experience, and you'd still leave again with a close enough explanation of what the research was saying, Okay, well, what do you think? Do you want to listen just a little bit more and see, or are you ready to wrap it up?
I don't know. We can listen to a little bit more. Should we like fast forward? What do you think?
Yeah, let's jump towards the end and see, maybe not the very end because I'm sure they'll just summarize, but yeah, somewhere.
23-minute mark?
Perfect.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, Daniel Pink, in his work on timing and productivity,
he talks about how our energy naturally ebbs and flows throughout the day.
We have these peaks and troughs.
Like an energy wave.
Exactly. And those peaks and troughs, they play a huge role in how effective we are at different tasks.
Okay, so there's a graph here showing mood throughout the day.
Peaking in the late morning.
Are you suggesting there's an optimal time for coaching, like right after that second cup of coffee?
Well, according to Pink, that peak time from around 8 to 11 a.m.
That's actually best for those analytical tasks that require a lot of focus and brain power.
So not the time to be asking someone, what did you notice about your wait time in that interaction?
Probably not the best time for that now.
Gotcha. So when is the best time for those coaching conversations?
Pink calls it the recovery phase, which typically falls later in the day.
Recovery, so like after lunch, when we're feeling a little more...
Refueled, exactly. That's when our brains are primed for brainstorming, for creative problem solving.
For those aha moments that are so essential to effective coaching.
Because coaching is all about collaboration.
Thinking outside the box.
Coming up with those tailored solutions.
It's about sparking those creative fires.
That's such a practical tip. I'm already thinking about how I can rearrange my schedule to capitalize on those recovery windows.
A little schedule shifting can go a long way.
But I have a confession.
Confession time.
I'm listening.
Even with all this knowledge about coaching,
I still get that little hesitation sometimes.
that voice in my head saying, maybe I shouldn't say anything. Oh, I think we've all been there.
That fear of awkwardness.
That worry that we might offend someone.
Especially when it's someone we work closely with.
It's natural to feel that way. But here's the thing.
Lay it on me.
These slides remind us that we have a choice.
A choice.
We can either stay silent
And let those opportunities for growth pass us by.
or
Or we can step outside our comfort zones.
embrace those moments of vulnerability.
And trust that our feedback, delivered with kindness and respect, can make a real difference.
Okay, so now I have some even more thoughts. I'm glad we continued because I don't know that I could listen to 30 minutes of this, right? Like I could listen to 6 minutes of it and get some content and sort of understand what we're talking about, like the beginning of this. But 30 minutes of some of that seems like filler, right? Like it's just banter back and forth that doesn't really go anywhere.
I wonder if you could create a briefing doc from the slides and then input the briefing doc as a way to get the conversation in the cliff notes. Like, I wonder, because I feel like that's what I want here. I want to be able to say, like, okay, make this like all the biggest points in, 3 minutes. Like, I want to like have it tailor it to that.
Well, yeah, and if you think about what would we do with that audio, you would, like an AACLA, right? You break things down into small chunks, and it's not, hey, it's a 9-hour video that you're watching, right? It's all these short clips or shorter experiences, right? Is that fair? Mm-hmm. So same thing here. Like if you had a briefing document and said, okay, just make a piece of audio for this point, and then make another piece of audio for this point, another piece of audio for this point, and you essentially had a playlist that you could jump around in and put it into like a table of contents, I could see how that could be really useful.
Totally. I have another clinical idea, Chris. So oftentimes when I'm working, lay it on me. I was like, wow, that's so lifelike. They also have like such like radio host voices. But what I was thinking about is oftentimes I'm working with some of my students on skills like conversational texting. So like oftentimes I'll like pull up, I love using iFakeTextMessage.com. It's just a free website where it like kind of it looks like a cell phone screen and you can kind of go back and forth. And I wonder if you were able to export like a conversation, because like at the end of like 10 or 15 minutes, we have a conversation. Like, I wonder what that would be like them having a conversation as a way to kind of like do something fun with your student after the conversation's already, created. We'll go back and forth and we read it, and sometimes I'll record it. So I'll be, the other person, and then my student will be one of the people, and we'll go back and forth and record it and listen to it. But I just wonder what would happen if you input it into something like this.
Yeah, all these fun things we could do to explore how to use it with students for professional learning, to increase your own productivity. I wonder about, since this, once you save this, right, it saves it as a note. And what happens when you have done this 50 times, 100 times? What does your sticky note page of all these notes look like, and how can you use it? So I feel like we're just scratching the surface here of what can be done. And, with this episode, I hope people go back, they play with it, and have their thoughts about it, and share their thoughts with us on on social media, or write us on our email at talkingwithtech@gmail.com. I have one more story to share about this, and that is I just got back from the United Ability Conference, which is in Alabama. I went last year. I got the opportunity to go again this year. Listeners of the podcast will know that we've interviewed a bunch of people from the United Ability Conference that I met there last year, and there's episodes in the last year from people that participated in that conference. So one of the sessions that they invited me to do was on generative AI and using it for designing awesome experiences for everyone, including people with disabilities. And this tool was new to me. Like I learned it on maybe a Friday or a Saturday. I was playing with it, and then I was like, well, I'm going to show it in this presentation right at the beginning of the presentation, and so which was on a Tuesday, So I showed this to a room full of people, and then we opened it up in the same way that, I just showed it to you and then said, well, let's talk about it for a second. And after I stopped playing the audio, the room was in this stunned silence. Like everyone was sort of just their mouth gaping open, their eyes wide with shock. And if I'm being honest, a little bit of fear, and I said, oh, okay, we're all in our different places when we're experiencing that. And they're all kind of slowly nodding like we're living in the future. Like it feels like something out of a sci-fi movie, what was just created here. And there was definitely this fear around, deepfakes, if this can be generated and it sounds so human, and that's intentionally why at the beginning of this episode I didn't tell you what we were going to listen to. I didn't queue up the listeners that what we'll be listening to. I wonder how many people listening right now thought it was two humans. And like you, it was like, well, I know Chris, so there's something going on here. It's probably an AI tool. But if I hadn't done that, if it wasn't coming from me, if someone else presented it to you, could you pass it off as two humans, And what other things are out there that exist like that, or that will be coming, that it becomes easier to do and easier to fake? And what kind of protections can we put in place? What skills do we have to teach the people we work with to help recognize those things, like red flags, like, why are my hackles raising that this might not be real? What kind of, we are optimistic people. We generate, we see a tool like this. You and I start to brainstorm all the different ways we can use it clinically in our professional practice and to help people, right? But just like any other tool, there might be a little potential for danger or for tricking people. And I feel like that's just a part of something we have to talk about with anything with generative AI.
Totally. I mean, I think that it's wild to see what has happened in the world of AI in the last year or two. It's just it is a little scary because it is so real sounding. And even now what they can do with we have, a public podcast with hundreds of hours of our voice, sharing and talking, and what they can now do with that data set and creating other generative AI with our voice, even it does become scary. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is definitely a two-sided coin, right? There's this awesome side of it that would be, oh my gosh, that could save me so much time if I could make a digital version of myself to answer an email that I get the same email 10 times. And so we've created templates that you would, and tweak it each time you send it, but sort of what if it was the same thing with video, right? Here's this video that I could send off that's a version of me based that I didn't actually have to make. I used AI to create a version of me. That is exciting to me in a time-saving sort of way. But then the other side of that coin is, well, what if someone else used it for something malicious? And now suddenly I'm on the hook for it, well, Chris, why did you say that this thing? Wait, I didn't say that. That's not me,
Totally. I know. It's great. It's crazy.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this look at Notebook LM. We totally invite you to go experiment with it on your own, see what you think, see what kind of usage cases you can come up with, and then share that with us on social media or via email or however you want to reach out to us, because it is exciting if it's used for the powers of good.